In this episode, I thought it'd be interesting to discuss how knowledge, personal bias, as well as context can influence our ability to communicate with each other.
Well, it's interesting because, oftentimes people will think that they're being objective, but in truth, they are not.
Yeah, it's difficult to remain objective through a conversation. And there's been several experiences over the past few weeks that have really brought this to light. Some from coaching, some from our analysis of Dr. Peterson's lecture. And I thought it'd be an interesting topic to kind of get into on all sides. So why don't we get started? I'm going to go ahead and just introduce anyone that's new to the platform. Welcome to 12-Week Relationships. This is your place for better relationships in weeks, not years. My name is Pye.
I'm Dr. Glen.
And before we get into it, I do want to mention that we have a new group coaching cohort coming up. So we're going to be opening up, I think, the last week of September. And we do it quarterly. So be sure to be on the wait list. If you guys are interested, we'll have links in the video. You guys can sign up. We're going to allow everybody that's on the newsletter and on the wait list to join first before we make it public. And there's only 20 spots available. So they tend to sell out quick.
It goes quick.
Okay. Knowledge, bias, and context. I want to discuss first the Jordan Peterson take that we did, analyzing that. And we have quite a bit of stuff to share on this. But this is an example of two different views when it comes to background knowledge and experience with Jordan Peterson. Personally, I have listened to Jordan Peterson quite a bit. I feel like I've spent probably, I don't want to over exaggerate this. I'd probably spent like 30, 40 hours worth of time over the course of, the past few years listening to his lectures, to, different things he's done. So I don't consider myself at all a JP expert. But on the flip side, you have virtually zero experience.
Yeah, I've seen a few interviews. I think there was like one video that you sent me that was like a 5 or 10 minute short. And then Butchers and Liars, that was it. That was the first time I ever saw that.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting in and of itself because, seeing how two different people with different backgrounds can kind of interpret something is very fascinating. One of the funny things that we got, so there were several commenters and YouTube. I hope you don't read our YouTube comments. Do you read our YouTube comments?
I'll go through it. Then I can see like the strong reaction sometimes that it provokes in people. So yeah, I do read it.
Does it bother you?
Sometimes it does.
Sometimes.
No, sometimes it does. It depends on my mood, or like depends on like I'll think and I'm like, man, maybe I was like, am I being unfair? Or like I'll try to contemplate it. So yeah, I'll read them.
Yeah. Well, you should stop.
Okay, I'm gonna stop.
No,
it's getting worse.
No, it's
getting worse.
It's fine to read them. It's just like, but not taking them with a grain of salt, because I want to emphasize this. Like when it comes to good communication, right? Your ability to communicate something effectively, to me, means several different things. A lot of the criticism that we got, I don't want to say a lot, because I feel like by and large, there's over 5,000 or 6,000 people that have listened to the podcast as well as watched the YouTube video at this point. And it's only been up a week or so. And so by and large, most of the comments and feedback are very positive. The only thing is the negative ones, they tend to be very loud, right? But one of the consistent negative comments between a couple different people was that we need to do our background research. We need to know before talking about this, right? But this is what I have a problem with, because the first thing that I would say is, in effective communication, you should be taking into your message the fact that most people that are listening to what you're saying aren't going to be familiar with who you are, your background, or anything. So your ability to communicate that effectively matters.
Well, we were talking about that on the podcast too. Like, is this for a broad audience? Or is this for a specific audience that he's trying to target? And if the goal is to have this for a broad audience, the message, it wasn't being like, for me, I feel like I'm a part of that broader audience. It was hard to kind of process what he was sharing.
For sure.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of religious undertones they're not even undertones. It's like overtly religious statements that are being made within the context of his lecture. So it kind of is, number one, like and Jordan Peterson is communicating to a broad audience. He's communicating to everybody. So it's understanding that, all right, well, if I'm going to start bringing up religious dialogue into this, I'm going to immediately present something else for people to chew on. It's not going to necessarily alienate. It's not going to necessarily like, push people away, although it will in some cases, but it also distracts from the overall topic, because the topic at hand was basically gender reassignment surgeries on youth, right? And he said prepubescent youth.
Right.
So it's interesting that from the standpoint of, well, you should have done your homework and your research, that criticism, I don't feel like that is fair criticism at all, because Jordan Peterson is trying to talk to a broad audience. So what we were doing was sitting down, one person with some Jordan Peterson experience, one person without, to try to interpret what he's saying.
No, I agree. And from that lens, it's not objective, because that person's already defending him.
Correct.
Right? Saying like, well, you should know this, or you should do your research. Why do we have to do that? The video's up on display, we're reviewing it, and we're just watching it, right? So automatically that lens already has a bias to it, versus like I've never seen it before.
Yeah. And if you're communicating to a broad audience, you would expect that video and that video only to be the one that matters, right?
Agreed.
What's presented there is the message.
Agreed.
So it was a perfect example of how differing background experiences kind of changed our interpretation. The other side of it too was, I come from a pretty religious Christian background. I'm no longer practicing, but you also have had your experiences too on that side, right?
Yeah, like I grew up in the church, like, because my mom was religious, but I didn't have like the best experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I'm sure I bring that into the table. Like maybe there's a bias there. So when I was reading the comments, I was like, okay, is there a bias with me, or am I interpreting it from that lens? Like I was really trying to be very introspective.
Yeah, it was interesting because I would say that, I had both positive and negative experiences in my Christian upbringing, I guess. But having had experience with Jordan Peterson and having heard so much Christian dialogue, it didn't necessarily bother me. What I found really fascinating, though, was how much you were hung up on it during that conversation. Like that was a really big piece for you that you kept drawing. And it made me more aware of it too, to be honest. I actually appreciated your take, because I started going, man, yeah, it is actually very religious in the way that he's presenting the material, which again is odd from a communication standpoint, is odd, because if you're trying to convey the message if you're trying to communicate on gender reassignment, as soon as you bring religion into it, then you start to hit on those different background experiences, our different experiences and our histories. And it not only dilutes, but it distracts us from being able to focus on the actual topic at hand.
No, I agree. But that's why, like, in interpretation, to me, like he was intentionally doing that. And
could be.
Yeah, like that's how it was, because you had the title Butchers and Liars, which is already like this strong, like, whoa, like that's in your face. And then the introduction about like sacrificing babies before a God, right? Like this is how you get in favor with God. Like those are strong claims right from the beginning. And then going into about, the reassignment and all of that. So that was just, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other interesting fact was this piece. So some of the commenters actually mentioned that Jordan Peterson is not actually Christian. That was fascinating, because despite having listened to JP's lectures and content for the past few years, I always assumed that he was.
Well, the other thing too is because, like I didn't know too much. So once I read those comments, I did some research. Like I started reading some articles, and then there was like this one article where he was talking about like his struggles, with Christianity, and how like there's some truth to it. And at least that's how I read it when he was there was like the transcript of it. And I was like, okay, so he's engaged with it. Like in the least, he's familiar with it, and he's like involved in it in some way. And it's a part of his kind of dialogue.
Yeah. And I almost feel like it goes a bit beyond that, because he might say himself that like, I mean, he's basically said there is so much evidence that supports this, and it's used, so broadly or whatnot. But he says that I personally have a hard time acknowledging or saying that I'm Christian, whatever it might be. But to me, it's like, I go back to, well, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's probably a duck type thing. And so it was funny to read the comments that say so many people standing up and saying that he's not Christian, when, hey, over the past course of these last years listening to him, there's so much Christian dialogue, and I don't have a problem with that. But that is, again, odd. And then there's videos that actually are going into depth analyzing whether Jordan Peterson is Christian or not. And once again, I go back to this, okay, background knowledge and experience, it matters from the context of communication. And if you are communicating on a specific topic, you have to understand that whatever the topic might be, as communicators, we need to distill that topic down to what it is and remove anything that could potentially be a distraction. The fact that so many people are just debating and discussing and trying to figure this out means that we're not wrong to be confused on this.
No, I agree, because gender reassignment is about reassigning your gender. At what age, is it appropriate to do it at a young age? What are the effects? What are the psychological effects? And it's going into this other direction about religion and, does he believe it? Is he a Christian or not? Because all of that was kind of infused within that lecture.
And that shouldn't matter within the context of that discussion, right?
Exactly.
Within the context of gender reassignment surgery, we shouldn't be dialoguing about Christianity or whether someone is or is not, or any of those things.
Yeah, it should be our psychotherapists and doctors, butchers and liars, because that was the title of his video. So
going back to all of this, what is our kind of takeaway? Well, as an educator or just as a communicator in general, it reminds me of the importance of really trying to figure out what it is I want to communicate and narrowing that thing down, like making sure that whatever I include within the context of a lecture, within the context of material, or just in a conversation with another person, maybe we're addressing a problem, whatever it is, it's making sure that we stick to that problem and not introducing anything else, anything that could be just a distraction to the conversation.
No, I agree. Like you have to be responsible with the content that you put out.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And just like in everyday, because not everybody is a educator or content creator, right? But in everyday conversation, like if I'm going to come to you and I'm going to say, Glen, let's say from a husband and wife scenario, right? I come to you and I say, I really wish you would wash the dishes at the end of the night and, put them in the dishwasher. So when I wake up in the morning, it's not the first thing that I'm doing, right? I'm using a specific topic from my own marriage. That's something that Yen has told me several times. If she were to add into that, like what if she came to me and she said, I really wish you would wash the dishes and put them into the dishwasher so it's not the first thing that I do in the morning, and said, I find that this and a bunch of other things that you're doing are really hurtful and makes me feel like you don't value me. As soon as you introduce that piece, then I'm going to go, well, what are those other things now?
Yeah, it goes away from the dishes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I leave the topic of the dishes, which is really the issue. And now I go on to, and by the way, before we get like haters here, I do most of the cooking, most of the kitchen work and all that kind of stuff. So just lay off, okay? The one thing that we have a nanny that comes in the morning and I'm like, if there's remaining dishes, I'd like to save some family time and let the nanny do the dishes in the morning. But it bothers Yen so much that she'll wake up and do the dishes. But point being, as soon as anyone introduces something else to that, we get hooked on it. It's like a fishing lure that pulls us in another direction.
Well, that is true too. But also, like when you're talking about like very emotionally charged topics, it's important to not be defensive about it.
It's even more the case, right? It's even more the case that you stay
grounded and you stay open and like, oh, okay, I could see people's perspectives. And if you're really healthy and you believe in something, you're more open-minded versus like being closed off and like, no, read more about this or do this. Like, how is that going to spark conversation?
Yeah. And just a side note, like one of the things that we very much enjoy, well, at least I personally, I'll speak for myself. I have come to a place in my life where I am totally fine being wrong. Okay. I was wrong thinking that Jordan Peterson was Christian. I was rightly wrong because he is very confusing in the dialogue that he brings up. But I think one of the things that people want is for us to be completely researched and to be right all the time. And that's just not the case. That's not even possible. We're going to be wrong. And I think that's kind of the mark of an intellectual is a person that's intellectual will acknowledge that there's more that I don't know than what I do know. And they'll be willing to change their opinion based on new information. So I'm going to be wrong, and I will change my opinion based on the best information that I have. That's kind of, to me, the fun and the purpose of a podcast like this, of long form discussion.
Yeah, and it's joyful to be wrong. Like, educate me then, help me understand in a better perspective. But there's also, like, even in the comments, I feel like there's a responsibility to, like, okay, well, like, direct us or guide us or give us good feedback so that we can understand better, versus just coming on this kind of space of like defensiveness and like, no, you got to do this, you got to do that. That's just going to close the conversation.
You got to toss those comments out. No, just let them go.
No, I do. No, it's fine. I'm just saying in general.
I agree completely. And
like, just don't be a dickhead. Like,
don't be a dickhead.
Whether you're sharing content, like, I feel like in anything, like, okay, even like, you know, the analysis, like, we have a responsibility to be like, it shouldn't be like mean spirited. It shouldn't be to try to demean somebody. And if it gets to that lens, and that's totally like, I would take full accountability. I don't want to do that. But at the same point, like, if it's just like we're exploring or we're engaging with ideas, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I felt like it was responsible in that way.
I think that is the responsible thing to do, is to actually engage in dialogue. You know, so often, and this is something that we're going to talk about in another episode that we're going to record, but it's getting to the understanding that dialogue and working through ideas, whether right or wrong, this is the way to progress in anything, right?
Well, agreed.
So to come into it and to say like, we have to be right and researched on something, well, that kind of removes the purpose of having those dialogues. And we're going to come with the best information we have. And if that information changes, we will change our opinion on something. But in the context of what that lecture was, it already, see, if you want to judge the effectiveness of that lecture, it shouldn't be to Jordan Peterson fans. It shouldn't be to people that know his work. If you want to judge the effectiveness of someone's communication, you take that lecture, you take that video, and you present it to someone that has no understanding whatsoever of what he's talking about. That is the best way to gauge how effectively he's communicating, or anybody's communicating, right?
No, agreed, because that lets you know how effective what you're sharing is it reaching people.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go into the second piece of this, and let's discuss how personal bias can enter the equation when it comes to communication. You want to take this one first?
Yeah. So is this where we were talking about the study?
The study is kind of the. Oh. I mean, you can talk about the study now if you want to.
Well, I mean, just confirmation bias in general, right? Like, people have a specific set of things that they believe to be true, and then you'll look for things to validate what you believe, and it doesn't allow you to see other perspectives. You're only seeing what it is that you want to see.
Yeah. And we have plenty of examples of this, and there's multiple different types of biases, right? But it's basically, confirmation bias is probably one of the most significant ones that you would experience in communication, or just in a relationship with someone. And an example of that would be, well, I wrote down like the husband or wife that sees the other person through a negative lens, right? Let's say that so many things have happened in a relationship. We see this kind of stuff quite a bit, where let's say the husband, right? So much has happened. His wife has done so many things over the course of the past 10 years that his regard, his respect and admiration for this person is completely eroded. So really, when he looks at his wife, he sees someone that is not a partner, someone that is, not contributing to the relationship in the same way, someone who is not engaged. And he very much looks down upon that because he doesn't see an equal. He sees someone that is disconnected from their relationship. Now, that might be partially true. It might be completely true. But that opinion, that belief, then tints every single thing that she does. Because if she does something positive, it doesn't matter. It's not enough. It's either ignored or it's not enough. She could go and do, 20 different things around the home, but it's still not going to be adequate.
She's just covering up for the things that she didn't do before.
Correct.
Like, it's already a negative lens, no matter what.
And everything that she might do wrong again, like maybe she checks her phone, maybe she does something, maybe she's not engaged in a conversation, it becomes support and backup to that belief that, see, she's not engaged, she's completely checked out of this. So we tend to take this belief and use it to basically toss out anything that's against that belief and grab onto anything that supports it.
No, I agree. Like I had a coworker, he was a brilliant clinician, but he always had like this dark cloud around him. Like it was always raining on him. And so he actually got a promotion. When he got the promotion, how do you think he responded? Given he has a dark cloud, when he got the promotion, what do you think he said?
You're going to find every way he can to criticize it.
He was like, dude, this is the worst thing ever, man. It's only like, I think it was like $800 more a month, which isn't that much because taxes are going to take it away. I'm going to see clients less because I have to manage people more. I'm going to be under so much stress. He's all, this sucks, right? So he went around sharing all that to the other coworkers and went to the boss. And so the boss confronted him and he's like, well, dude, if you don't want the promotion, you don't have to take it, right? Yeah. It's fine, right? So he's like, okay, he didn't take the promotion. And then how do you think he responded?
Now he's unhappy about not getting the promotion.
He was like, bro, that $800 would have helped me with my phone bill and I could give money to my kids and I get to see clients less. And then all I had to do was just manage people. I would have had more time. This sucks, right? So either way, like he already had his biases and he was just going to make it that no matter what.
What do you feel like that underlying belief was? What was that bias that he had?
I can never get what I want. And this is the crazy thing about it. Like when I was working with him, like actually I learned the most from him when I was like early in my career, clinically, right? But on a personal level, he wouldn't apply it. Like there was always an emotional cutoff level where he had an opportunity and he would sabotage it. And he would never move forward. And that was his own personal bias and beliefs. But he would give me the advice like, bro, don't do what I did and do this. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I won't do that. And then so I would just kind of, go on that trajectory.
I find that to be a very clinician thing to do. Like most of us get into therapy, coaching, clinical work, all this because we've had personal experiences that have driven us toward this direction, right? But there's quite a few that regardless of, I don't know what the disorder would be. Maybe it's some sort of borderline disorder, whatever it might be, but they can give the advice, but they don't take it themselves. And their life remains a mess and they remain focused on fixing other people's problems.
Yeah. And oftentimes like people, they'll use it as a distraction. So like they're indirectly, it's kind of like an indirect way of like dealing with your own emotions and you're giving advice, but you're literally just trying to work it through yourself.
Yeah.
And there's like a limit to how much that person can actually help you then.
So going back to, you mentioned a study by Hugo Mercy. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So this is a really cool study. And basically he's saying that human beings are really logical. We're very advanced, right? We love growth and we're really good at like survival. And we're way advanced, versus other species, except when it comes to human relationships, right?
Yeah.
And he's all, this is where all logic goes away. And they in that study, it's like a Harvard study, they even found like a gene, and we have it's known like a loyalty gene. So no matter how bad things are or how bad this relationship is, and you're like, dude, logically, I need to get the hell out. Those genes are like, no, stay.
Yeah.
Be loyal, be a part of this tribe and group. And that's the only time, or that's one of the few times that we lose all logic and we're unable to process anything in a healthy way.
That in and of itself is a fascinating topic. It'd be fun to actually go in depth into that loyalty gene, but it makes sense from just a high level overview. It makes sense from the standpoint of human beings have been tribal, right? Like in the past, thousands of years ago, even hundreds of years ago, survival depended on being part of a tribe. It was difficult to be on your own and to be able to function. And so we know that so much of the way that we think, so much of our just not only thought processes, but down to addictions, down to things that we like, it's all passed through genetic code, which is why our children, if we are alcoholic, our children can be, be predisposed to being alcoholic. And if we're athletic, our children can be, predisposed to being athletic, and whatever those traits are, they get passed down. So if our ancestors were so focused on remaining part of the tribe because that's what meant that's what it took to survive, then we would likely have that same instinct, that loyalty gene. And in many cases today where, you don't necessarily need to be around toxic people because you're going to be able to survive just fine, on your own, that loyalty gene can actually affect us in a negative way.
Yeah. And it also involves love and connection. We all need love and connection, no matter how independent you are, people that care about you. So it's that desire to have that too. But yeah, you're right. Like it's just this survival thing. We're at this stage of life where we don't you can be okay on your own. Like,
Mhm.
it'll be okay. So it's learning to evolve past that survival gene or that loyalty gene.
Yeah. So if we were to summarize before we get onto kind of the third point, talking about context, what we're really talking about throughout this episode is just methods of improving our ability to communicate, right? The first thing that we're talking about is understanding that everybody's going to approach a subject with some level of background experience, and just personal experiences that kind of tint their vision of the topic at hand, which means that it's really good to stay focused. Like, whenever you want to discuss something, staying focused on that topic. Now, it's important in context of a lecture, right, to stay on topic, but it's even more so important when it comes to, or it's even more critical when it comes to, let's say, conflict, when it comes to trying to resolve an argument. And even more so when it comes to a topic that is highly charged and highly sensitive, to stay on that topic and not to introduce things that could distract.
Yeah. And especially at that time, it's really important to be open-minded, right? So even though you may have your own personal beliefs or it's triggering you, is putting that to the side and seeing, allowing all perspectives to be heard and embracing it. And bottom line, just don't be a dickhead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That could go a long way in just general advice. Maybe
Yeah.
we'll do a short that's like, don't be a dickhead. For better relationships,
Just
join
don't
the
be a
newsletter.
dickhead, right? Like, be a little open-minded. You're not the judge and jury, and people don't have to prove everything to you. Like, take the robe off, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Second piece of this is understanding that personal bias is always going to affect someone's opinion, their thoughts within any conversation, within any of your communication, right? So knowing that if you're seeing bias in that, what needs to be addressed is actually whatever that underlying belief is, whatever the bias is, in order to effectively communicate. And if you want to effectively communicate without addressing it, then it's kind of figuring out a way to do so without bringing up that person's bias. But in many cases, it's not. Now we go to the third piece of this, which is when it comes to communicating and specifically making snap judgments, context matters. Context is so important to a conversation.
Yeah, because that's what it should be about solely.
Yes, but taking things out of context it's almost becoming, I feel like it's becoming an art form. Like, you watch a podcast episode, and we do this all the time. We'll take snippets of an episode and we'll place them online. And out of context, I mean, we aim for all of them to make sense when we pull them out, right? But someone could maliciously go in and take something that we say out of context and use it to harm us. And it happens all the time to big celebrities. It happens to, people that are well known. Context matters. And it happens even in our conversations, right? Like, I'm going to give you an example of one. This is a personal example. A friend of mine came and asked, I'm noticing that one of my friends is in a relationship that might be potentially abusive, like emotionally abusive, or I don't think it's going anything beyond that. And then she said, are these things emotionally abusive? And she was bringing up things like stonewalling and like, basically ragging on the other person and talking about their flaws. And I said, I don't understand really what's going on in the context of their relationship, but yes, those are typically things that are manipulative and could be considered emotionally abusive. Then supposedly, this later down the road, like I'm talking like a year later, this other person, this third person comes and says, Pye, I heard you call me abusive. Why would you say that without saying it to my face? And they just blocked me, like straight up. So I couldn't respond back. I tried calling and I was like, I don't even know what they're, referencing. And, but I was completely blocked. Now come to find out, another year after this, that I guess in conversation, this message got translated and they heard that I called him emotionally abusive or abusive.
Oh, the story just got passed on and it just got worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they got into a fight and this, like, I'm sure it just escalated or there's a lot of fabrication.
And my friend who I'm chatting with, because he's relaying the information back to me of like, okay, this is, and I'm like, you know what, it's fine, it's not a big deal, like I'm good, don't need to worry about it at all. And I go, but that's not what I said at all. My friend goes, well, it is what you said though. And I go, no, what I said was in relation to someone sharing with me and asking, would this be considered emotionally abusive? I said, yes, that would be manipulative and emotionally abusive. But there's a big difference between that and calling someone abusive.
Emotionally abusive.
There's like, if you come to me with a question and I say, yes, behavior like that would be this, that is not the same thing as me saying so-and-so is abusive. And my buddy, who's always like, he's always kind of just funny devil's advocate. He's like, yeah, but you know, same thing.
No.
Plus, he's probably abusive. I'm like, dude. Anyway.
But it shrunk it down just to like, did you say it or not? Versus like, what about what the spouse said? And why was that conversation happening? And what was she sharing, right? No one was interested in that.
No. And so that's an example of taking something completely out of context. And when you bring it back to what it was contextually, people go, oh, yeah. If someone asked, is this abusive behavior? You answer the question. But that is not the same thing as calling someone else abusive. So when you bring it back to context, it makes complete sense why that would happen. But when you take it out of context, it's very easy to snap judge and to say like, okay, you know, I can't believe they did that. I'm not going to be friends with them anymore. And there's examples of this all over the place when it comes to social media, when it comes to celebrities. One of the one that pops into my mind was when everyone was trying to slam Joe Rogan. Remember the N-word?
Oh, when he
video?
Made that comment, yeah.
So this strange N-word video from like 10 years back starts to recirculate right around the time where Joe Rogan's being criticized by TV networks. So it becomes very transparent, like, dude, this has got to be TV networks who feel like encroached, who feel like whatever this is. And so they find this clip and they circulate just him saying the N-word. Cool. It's kind of gross that Joe Rogan said the N-word. But when you go back to the context of it, we're in a different time. He's paraphrasing a joke. And maybe it's still not okay to paraphrase a joke and to say that. Fine. People learn this over time, right? But in no way was it malicious or anything. But they attempt to take that out of context to smear somebody.
Yeah, and this is where like, you know, there should be, I mean, it's fine to point something out or even to bring that up, but once again, that was malicious. But at the same time, there has to be a point of reconciliation or understanding. Nobody's perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. So there has to be a scope of understanding for anyone.
Sure. That's a weird thing about all this kind of stuff, right? Is that I don't know what we expect of other people. Like to take something out of context and then to judge somebody for it. It says something very strange about us. Like that we expect someone else to not make the same mistakes that, let's be honest, you and I have made.
It's a lack of insight. It's a lack of self-awareness. And then that in and of itself is a form of tribalism, right?
Sure.
That group we're the group that's going to decide what's right or wrong, and we're going to punish you for it. That in and of itself is that loyalty gene. Well, this is part of our group and tribe.
For sure. And how many, like if we were to talk just specifically on that example, right? Growing up when we're teenagers and in high school, how many of us have never said the N-word in the context of like trying to joke around, be funny or fit in or whatever it might be? Like, dude, I used every racial slur that I could find when I was younger. I would listen to things in rap, and it was only through the context of using them and for people correcting me that I would go, okay, certain things are not okay to say. Certain things I can't even joke about. Certain things are, you learn through being corrected. But if those were recorded, then you get in trouble, right? Like how hypocritical and insane is it that we would do this to each other when knowing, I'll bet you made the exact, whether you admit it or not, I'll bet you've said the exact same things. It just wasn't recorded.
Yeah. And it's so childish. Like, oh, you got caught and I didn't. So I'm going to watch you suffer indirectly. Like, why would you want to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now there are other cases where context doesn't necessarily matter. When a message is so extreme that you can form an opinion and a snap judgment just based on one simple thing. And a good example of this, it's funny. I was going to think a good example was like kind of Andrew Tate and a lot of the extreme things that he says. And I'm not saying anything about, like, I don't even know who this guy is as a person or what he I think he does a lot of things that are inflammatory just to get attention. But when you say certain things that are like just very damaging, like just an explicit opinion that is its own statement, that is so crazy, you know, whether it's gender roles, whether it's whatever it should be, what a woman's place is, what a man's place is. When you say, speak an opinion that is so extreme and specific that there's no way to misunderstand it, it kind of makes sense to make a snap judgment in that case. Like, this is what the person actually thinks or is standing behind.
Well, in that example, I've never seen his videos before, but the intent is there. You can see this person's intent.
Yeah, there's an
intent of like sensationalism and controversy, but also just being a dick, right? I mean, sorry, I keep using that word over and over. You guys can edit it out, right? But there's the intent there. Like the Joe Rogan example, he used it one time. It was a recording, but from what we've seen, I don't think he's a racist. I don't think he hates other cultures. He seems pretty open to other cultures. So in that context, it was just something that happened. He's not that way. He cares about other cultures and other people. But in this example with Andrew Tate, the intent is automatically right there. It's kind of like the Donald Sterling thing.
You can, and you can also look at the body of work, right? You can look at the body of work of someone and say, like, there's a lot of messages that are just like that one. You know what's funny? 6 months ago or so, we actually did an opinion piece on, not an opinion piece, but we did a short, and I didn't know who he was at the time, but it was Andrew Tate. Someone, there was a short video that said, it was Andrew Tate sharing an opinion. And it wasn't necessarily wrong. The way he was saying it was very inflammatory, but this was before he was like, you know, mainstream. So we did like what's called a stitch, right? So you have the first 5 seconds, which people do this all the time. They'll stitch a video and take the first 5 seconds and then respond to it with an opinion or a judgment. And this is the most perfect way. Like it is literally social media, TikTok and Instagram and all it's their way of giving you a tool to take somebody out of context. It's hilarious because you can take the first 5 seconds, the video might be 60 seconds or 90 seconds, but you just take the first 5, whatever they might have said, and then you start rendering opinion on it. So everybody was doing that to this one clip, but if you listen to the remainder of the clip, like what he's saying is actually in one of these videos was pretty accurate, and he's saying it in a way that's kind of douchey. So we did a response to it, and I said, you know, how this person's communicating this is not necessarily effective, but what they're saying is not wrong either. Like, and it was a video to that. It's funny if we actually re-release that video, we'd probably get in a lot of trouble now because Andrew Tate has now been banned on everything, and people would be like, "You're supporting him," and that would be a great example of taking something out of context. Someone can go find that video and be like, 12-week relationships fully supports Andrew Tate. But we did another video where, what was it? It says, how do you repair trust in a relationship, right? That was the opening line. And I go on in the video to say, well, in some cases, it's not possible to repair trust. But I also give steps on how you can repair trust. And in this video, someone does that stitch that they take the first 5 seconds. How does someone repair trust? And then they stitch right there. And the guy goes, you don't. Because when I trust in someone, I trust in them wholeheartedly. And if you break that, I'm gone. You don't repair trust. Bye. And a couple of our supporters went onto his page and they're like, did you listen to the rest of the video? Because that's exactly what they said. They also gave some insightful tips. But it's hilarious because technology is being designed to take things out of context.
It's because it just creates more and more controversy.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. It creates more dialogue and where there was none. And it's so incredibly toxic.
And it doesn't reward nuance or, like you said, context.
Yeah.
Context doesn't matter when you use it.
So there are some cases where a belief or an opinion is so extreme that we can make a snap judgment. But in most cases, we really got to look at context before you can render a judgment on anything. And even in the cases that are extreme, to be honest, from my personal opinion, I don't, unless something is particularly damaging, but I guess this is part of that other conversation. If something's particularly damaging, taking them and deplatforming, fine. But otherwise, if it's just being a douche, let the dialogue naturally happen so that they can learn on their own, so that people can come to their own awareness.
Yeah, bring it to the light. Let's have discussions. Let's open it up. And then naturally, if it's douchey, it'll just die.
Yeah, we have some really interesting words in this. They're all D words.
They're all D words today. I mean, like I think we're gonna do another thing on cancel culture. But if you're gonna be a part of that culture, do it because the intent behind it is bad and it's deserved. But also, like, for people that they made a mistake, there has to be a form of reconciliation and give the opportunity for that to happen.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. So we are done with that. Well, done with this episode in general. But the topics here, I feel like, are things that we could just keep going on for quite a while. Hopefully, everyone else that's listening or watching found this helpful. And if you did, and you guys want to learn more, first thing we would say is join the newsletter. The newsletter is completely free. You can find it at 12weekrelationships.com. Each week, we're going to send out weekly insights. It includes just, well, they're just handwritten messages that gives you tips and insights on how to have better relationships. That's also where we're going to notify of our group coaching programs, as well as any individual coaching programs that we offer. So currently we have one-on-one coaching available with Dr. Glen. The wait list for that is extending out through the end of the year, but there are going to be slots open. So let me do that one piece again. Currently we have one-on-one coaching available with Dr. Glen. There is a wait list for us. So we'd recommend jumping onto that as quick as possible. We also have a wait list for the group coaching programs. And when we are going to release a new one, they come out quarterly. We have another one coming really soon. So if you're on the wait list, you'll be notified so you can grab a seat as soon as they're available. We'll have 20 seats coming up for this next group coaching program. And we're finishing up the current one, which is...
It's been amazing.
It's been awesome.
They're an awesome group.
Yeah. So that's it for us. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Thank you.